All right, checking back in on the state of the economy, a major report coming out today. The economy shrank for the second consecutive quarter. Many economists believe that would constitute a recession, as you see on the screen here, almost a full percentage point in the second quarter.
The White House has responded to this morning's GDP report. The president issuing a statement saying coming off of last year's historic economic growth and regaining all the private sector jobs lost during the pandemic crisis, it's no surprise that the economy is slowing down as the Federal Reserve acts to bring down inflation. But even as we face historic global challenges, we are on the right path and we will come through this transition stronger and more secure. All right, let's welcome in our panelists now. Newsweek opinion editor Josh Hammer is with us. Also with us today, Democratic analyst Jonathan Harris. Nice to see you, gentlemen. Thanks for coming on. Josh, let me toss it to you. Your thoughts on the White House's response to, again, this morning's GDP report.
So, look, I'm not an economics PhD. I did study economics when I was in college. I was an economics major. I can tell you literally in Econ 101, every Econ 101 student all across the United States of America learns that a recession is defined by consecutive quarters of GDP contraction. That has been the accepted definition of what a recession is for decades. I mean, what the White House is currently trying to do right now, in terms of literally trying to go to whitehouse.gov, using government websites themselves, taxpayer-subsidized, taxpayer-funded communication channels to actually try to gaslight the American people and say that what you are seeing in that very graphic that the viewers here on Newsmax just saw is not indicative of a recession. I don't really know how to describe that other than Orwellian. I mean, I think conservatives tend to kind of overuse the word Orwellian sometimes with respect to what the left is doing. But, you know, I saw some people on Twitter this morning talking about that the Wikipedia page for recession. I have not been able to confirm this before I went on air with you guys. But apparently the Wikipedia page for recession, they changed the definition of it within the past 48 hours. I saw some signs that you were unable to edit the definition of it in the Wikipedia page. This is really crazy stuff. But my heart goes out to the people who are struggling right now, and I obviously hope that this gets a lot better. I fear that it probably will not anytime soon, though.
Yeah, it's very important to hone in on that. Everyday Americans, again, are paying more. We've said it, just about every news network reports that there's no way around that. The cost of goods has been up. It has been up. It has stayed up. The gas prices have been coming down, but they hit $5. Of course, they are coming down. They're averaging right now $4.28, but again, still a couple bucks higher than they were a couple years back. I will go to Jonathan Harris on this. In terms of messaging here, no matter how you do spin it, Americans are hurting. But if we focus and hone in on the messaging from this White House, do you agree this would be the best way to handle it? Essentially, what many say are redefining what a recession is, Jonathan.
Well, one of the things that's super important when you're talking about a recession to point out is that there is actually no universally agreed upon definition of a recession. Many people do the widely accepted definition is 2 quarters of GDP decline, but it has to be significant GDP decline. And again, even that is not a universally accepted definition. One of the other components that they talk about in defining a recession is the job market. And our job market has been on fire. I think we added 2.7 million jobs just within the last 6 months. So it's you can't sort of narrowly isolate certain things to get your headline of a recession. And I think one of the concerning things is, and economists point this out, they say that a component in a recession is also sort of psychological. If people believe we're in a recession, they'll start behaving that way, and that in and of itself can trigger a recession. So I think the Republicans, especially because the last recession we had officially was under Donald Trump, are somehow, which is disturbing, eager to try to give Biden a recession so they can say, oh, well, the last one we had wasn't just under Donald Trump, which is very, very disturbing. To have recovered all of the jobs that we lost from the pandemic is in under 2 years of the Biden administration is absolutely incredible. And I think that's something we should be celebrating rather than trying to sort of psychologically trick people into declining the economy.
The president also does cite the private sector job growth in his statement, as we read out there. But Josh, you know, when Americans are looking at their credit card bills, it's not just psychological. It's reality, quite frankly, when these costs are going up.
Yeah, look, to Jonathan's point, no one here is trying to deny that any kind of recession in the past was not a recession. What happened in the final year of President Trump's presidency when COVID struck was obviously a profound recession. I mean, the graphic we just saw, GDP massively contracted, obviously, when the coronavirus struck the world. But what's happening now is a recession nonetheless. I mean, it might be a mild recession under any definition of the term. But look, to your point, inflation right now, I mean, to Jonathan's point, the job market and the unemployment rate is, historically speaking, currently not terrible. And, for the actual economist PhDs trying to kind of assess why inflation is so high and GDP is contracting while the job market is actually statistically not terrible, that'll be good fodder for future economic research. But on a day-to-day concern, honestly, I think most Americans feel an elevated 9.1% CPI inflation rate, more probably than they feel even a comparatively higher unemployment rate, trying to compare those things. Because inflation hits literally everyone, whether you have a job or not, whether it's gasoline, eggs, chicken, supermarket goods, literally whatever you are purchasing, especially when wages are stagnant. Wages are currently not escalating. They are very, very, very stagnant. In a stagnant wage economy, inflation's a total killer. Everyone's feeling it right now.
Talking about inflation, the Democrats have recently come to an agreement on what they're calling the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. It's a $739 billion reconciliation bill here. It's going to focus on health care, reducing prices of prescription drugs, climate change, clean energy. They're doing it by raising corporate taxes. My question again for Jonathan Harris, do you believe that this new bill would bring down inflation as it is called Inflation Reduction Act?
Well, hopefully, and I think if I have that correct, the Democrats are planning to pass it through reconciliation. So as long as they have all the Democrats on board, Manchin's now somehow back on board, which is great. They won't have to worry about Republicans blocking it, and I hope so. I mean, one of the things that people don't point out is that inflation happens every year. So Americans are feeling a pinch every year. That always happens. Things get more expensive every year. Obviously, this is a lot more, but I think we can always trace it back to that sort of pebble in the pond that was COVID and the ripple effects of that. So, and I think if you can see this mirrored all over the world, and as they pointed out, America is actually handling this a lot better than many other economies around the globe like ours. So with these measures by the Democrats, I think that'll help. And again, I think America is doing much better than a lot of other countries, similar economies around the world. So yeah, absolutely.
41-year record high inflation is what America is dealing with right now. Josh, what do you think about the Democrats' plan, the decision from Joe Manchin to come out in support of it? Did it surprise you? And is Kyrsten Sinema going to be on board with it?
Me.
Well, I'll answer your latter question first. I mean, I kind of assume in a compromise negotiation process like this, when Joe Manchin does something, Kyrsten Sinema will probably follow. Joe Manchin obviously lives at this point in one of the reddest states in America. West Virginia obviously went for Trump by gargantuan margins, among the highest margin of any state in the country. It literally might have been the highest state. So if he is even getting on board, I assume every Democrat will get in line here. Will this actually tamp down inflation? I mean, look, the very fact that they're spending more money, I mean, from an Econ 101 perspective, suggests that the answer is probably no. Throwing more money is kind of the exact wrong solution right now. I mean, the technical definition of inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. So in order to tamp down inflation, you can do one of two things, or possibly both things. You can limit the money supply. That's where the Federal Reserve comes in, obviously, with jacking up interest rates. Or you can produce domestic production. You can get manufacturing again, because that'll literally produce more goods. So, look, in my opinion, the Fed is probably not raising interest rates even quickly enough. That's outside the hands of Congress and the presidency. But from a fiscal policy spending package perspective, throwing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to try to tamp down inflation, I mean, that's basically the equivalent of, being a firefighter and going to a big conflagration and trying to kind of put out the flames by throwing matches at it. I mean, what is that going to do? It's really going to make the problem worse.
I'm still looking. I apologize, Jonathan. We are out of time, but again, I'm still looking for the next network. Who's going to land this interview with Senator Manchin?
Sure.
What changed? Because that climate initiative is still in there.
I want to know that too.
Right.
Was a dinner bought for him? What happened? Josh Hammer, Jonathan Harris, thanks so much.